Hello, and welcome to the first webinar in our employability series. In this session, we'll be talking about how to kick off your job search, and we'll take you right through from deciding what career path to follow to submitting an application and what happens next. The webinars in our series are getting to grips with interviews, personal brand and commercial awareness, and then the last session will be a panel discussion on careers in accountancy. So, due to the current situation with coronavirus, we are working from home, so please bear with us. It does present its own challenges, but I promise I will not have any unexpected visitors gate crashing. We have someone on hand to answer any technical questions you may have. If you're unable to get onto the webinar or can't hear, we'll answer those questions immediately. All attendees will be muted throughout the duration of the webinar, and there is a chat button at the bottom of the GoToWebinar, and this is where you'll be able to ask any questions that you may have. All of the content-led questions we will answer at the end of the webinar, but anything technical we'll answer straight away for you. To ask any questions throughout the session, GoToWebinar have a control panel at the side of your screen, and you'll notice a drop-down button next to questions. If you open this, you'll be able to send any questions you may have to the organisers, and we will answer them. We will keep them anonymous. So we've got roughly 20-25 minutes of content for you with 10 to 15 minutes for questions. We'll be sharing the recording after, so please don't worry if you miss anything. And we'll also just ask you to complete a short survey after the webinar. So without any other ado, we're just going to go through the agenda. So looking at how to identify which role might be right for you, then how do I find my dream job, how to submit that great application, just busting some myths about CVs, and then finally leaving it open for a Q&A. So I guess just a little bit about us and an intro into who we are. So my name is Rebecca Thompson. I'm a senior resourcing advisor at Grant Thornton, and I work in the experience hire division. So that means I deal with anyone that has 18 months experience right the way through. So I've spent about 15 years in recruitment, mostly on agency side, so working for companies that place people into big banks and financial services in London. But I also ran my own company really successfully for a number of years. And I focused on executive search and interim management into the insurance market. So I've got a lot of experience working with all different types of people. And I guess why the horse? So that is my pride and joy, and it's my one true passion outside of work. And it's passion is something that we talk about through this webinar. So just to keep that in mind, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Michelle.
Thanks, Rebecca. I love the picture of the horse and it makes me jealous of all the things that you've achieved. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Woods. I look after the trainee and early talent team at Grant Thornton. So what that means is we're responsible for recruiting approximately 500 trainees into the company every year, and that ranges from graduates through to school leavers and apprentices, summer interns and 12-month placements. I've been at Grant Thornton for about 6 years in a variety of roles. I've actually recently just come back from maternity leave, so I could probably have to say that my son Logan is my pride and joy, like your horse, Rebecca. But he's not going to be making a special appearance, unfortunately, today. He's being looked after by my other half. So I'm really pleased to be here to kind of share some hints and tips with you, and appreciate it's virtual, so I hope it works for you all. And any questions, please do fire away in the chat box, and we'll answer them as best we can. So thank you. So the first thing we wanted to talk about, and we think is really important, is many of you may be sat at home now kind of thinking about what's next for you. So maybe that's going on to further education such as university or a master's. And it may be that some of you want to go straight on to apprenticeship or a graduate scheme, or actually some of you are thinking about travelling and maybe getting a part-time or a full-time job for the moment. So we want to kind of explore how you might identify what a good role looks like for you. And one of the questions we often get asked is about experience, and we'll touch on that throughout the presentation. So for now, I would encourage you to have a think about, and maybe even get, if you've got access to a pen and paper to hand, maybe just think about these questions, and I'd maybe encourage you to even write them down. So the 3 things that I think are really important are to ask yourself, first of all, what motivates and energizes you? At Grant Thornton, we put a lot of emphasis on understanding what people's motivations are and what energizes you. And actually what we know is often things that energize you and things that you enjoy, you tend to do them a bit better. And it also means that you're probably more inclined to want to come into work even on those wintry, cold, horrible mornings, and kind of get into work and do well. So have a think about those things. Have a think about what are your strengths as well. So let's think about how we can really play to our strengths. So maybe people on this call who are particularly creative and really into art and actually might want to go into kind of a fashion or textiles or things like that. It might be other people that have a real eye on the detail and the numbers and problem solving and might think of something in accountancy, for example. And then it might be other people who really enjoy the communication and working with others and helping people. It might look at things like recruitment, HR, or social care. So have a think about what your strengths are, and you'll start to really identify that, I'm sure, now and as you go through your educational career and your professional career. And then finally, and I think this is not to be neglected, is what is important to you and what would you value from an employer. And actually for me, having worked for kind of 10 to 12 years now, that is really important for me. And it's paramount that I work for an organisation that matches my values and what I hold kind of close. So for me, it's having the autonomy, it's having agile working to fit in with my family life as well, but it's also working for an organisation that's purpose-led. So think about a company that offers what you want and what your kind of values are. So just maybe think about those 3 questions as we go through this presentation. So coming on to the next part, hopefully you've got some ideas in your mind now and you're starting to think about, okay, these are my strengths and this is what I value. So once you've done all of that and you've kind of written that down, and maybe it's something you can task yourself in between kind of the binges on Netflix and Sky box sets when you're in isolation, is what would kind of good look like? What would a great role be for you? So if I was to share a personal example, I always wanted to work in kind of recruitment and HR because of what I believe energizes me. And once I finish work, a great day will be when I've had lots of meetings, lots of communication with people, and I feel like I've really helped. So have a think about that opportunity that's great and what will energize you. Have a think about a role that's going to enable you to flourish. So when I say about finding a role that plays to your strengths, I don't just mean you need that role to match 95 or 90% of your strengths, but it would probably make a bit of sense if it matched to maybe 50 or 60% of your strengths. But do know that potentially roles you will have that don't play to every bit of your strength, and that's good because that's where you'll really stretch yourself and challenge yourself and grow as a person, personally and professionally. So have a think about both of those areas. And then finally, now you've thought about what you value, so whether that's kind of corporate social responsibility such as volunteering or climate change or areas like that, whether it's been in a purpose-led organisation, or as I said, whether it's flexibility and autonomy, or it might even be development and training. Really do some research and think about those employers that are going to be able to offer you those particular areas, so that we can find an opportunity that is both right for you in terms of a role, but also in terms of an employer. So I'd really encourage you to have a think about those areas.
So what are employers looking for? So on this slide, we've got a number of sort of key competencies. So some of these we actually interview against ourselves at all levels within Grant Thornton. Most are self-explanatory, but I just wanted to draw your attention to curiosity and adaptability and just kind of talk a little bit about those. So what do we mean by being curious? A lot of employees now are looking for people that are curious, ask questions, want to develop themselves, want to learn about other people and their businesses, and really curiosity does run through a lot of the other competencies that you have on the screen. And then adaptability, and I'm sure we all have a million examples now about how we've had to be adaptable. So Grant Thornton had sort of 4,500 people working from home within 12 hours. We did have an overnight sleep. So, but that was really due to the adaptability of the systems and the processes we've got. The people here are quite used to working from home and sort of working quite agilely. So yeah, it's just to have a think about those sort of types of competencies and where you've used those in your life. So I guess, where do I find my dream job? So here we've collated a few of the resources that we use, some of our favourites. There's so much online, so I'd really just say to you as a first off, go and do lots of research, but here are some of our best avenues. So LinkedIn, quite an obvious one. You'll probably know all about it. It's one of the most popular platforms. So create a profile and start connecting with people, start following firms that you're interested in. You can also create custom job alerts that sort of ping little things to your inbox and sort of will highlight companies that maybe you've never heard of before. And then you've got target jobs. So this is a really great resource for people that are looking for trainee opportunities. So you can apply to people's trainee schemes. You have a lot of inside scoop knowledge on there from people that are currently on those schemes. So it's a really good way to kind of just get a feel for the firms that you're interested in. But also they have a lot of information about different career paths, how people got there, the qualifications you need. So it's a really good resource for that. And you can also find a lot of career fairs on there. And I'd really encourage you to go and speak to as many employers as you can, even if you think, yeah, I don't want to work for them, they're boring, but you never know, they might actually surprise you, and you can never have enough information, is what I always think. So the next one, we use job sites like Indeed. Oh, sorry, can you go back? That we use job sites like Indeed, and they're used by a number of employers. They have roles on there from really junior right the way up to senior. And again, you can create custom job alerts. And then the last point on here is sort of the internships and work experience. So this is a really great way for people to kind of get a feel for a particular role or firm before committing and taking the plunge. And at Grant Thornton, we have a 12-month work experience program that allows sort of people from backgrounds that wouldn't necessarily be able to or have thought about a firm like Grant Thornton to be able to come and work for us for 12 months, gain experience, get a little bit of a feel for our culture, but then also they do tend to stay and join our trainee program. So it's a really great avenue to think about. And there are lots of industries where this is really the way in. And then also what I put on there too is sort of connections. So do your research, look at companies like sites like Glassdoor and Target Jobs, speak to friends, family, anyone you can speak to about their career, how they got there, what companies they work for. There's so much info out there. And of course, use your career service at school or college. There's a lot of information, so have a good read. So I'm just going to pass you back to Michelle, who will sort of talk you through the application process.
Thanks, Rebecca. I think there is so many really good sites out there, so definitely utilise them. I've personally found LinkedIn to be a really fantastic tool for my own career, and also just to connect with like-minded people. Often, if I'm thinking about different things I'm working on, whether it's assessment and selection or projects, there's even forums in there. So you can really kind of connect and share with like-minded professionals. So really would encourage you to do that. So now we're going to move on to two areas. First of all, it's the application form. So the application form is something that's typically used in when you're applying for jobs such as an apprenticeship or a graduate scheme, but it also can be used for other roles. So I just wanted to kind of touch on this because I know many of you are students at school, at college, and some of you are also at university. So at Grant Thornton, for example, and other professional services firms, the very first stage tends to be an application form, and that's the way that you can talk about the different attributes that you have, and it's often the way that companies would do that first assessment of you, really, to make the decision as to whether to move you later down the process. So it's really important that you invest in this part of the process and take the time to think about what the employer is asking you. So first of all, what I would really encourage you to do, if you can, if you have time, is get a copy of that job advert. So if you've seen the job on Indeed or on LinkedIn and you have the facilities, I would really encourage you to print it out. If you're not able to print it out, you don't have access to a printer, not to worry. Often with PDF, you can highlight and you can easily highlight what's important. So get yourself a copy of the job advert. If you can, even better, get your hands on the job specification. So this is effectively a bit more detail about what the role entails. If that's not online, you could always ask the employer for it. And then once you have those two things, I would really encourage you to go through it. So, kind of I'm more of a manual, so I prefer to kind of get my pink highlighter out. I've actually got it here, something I do kind of every day, and really highlight what is really important for you. So, or for that employer, sorry, I should say. So what are the attributes and skills needed for this role? So in that job advert, it should be super clear that what they're asking for you to do, so what they're expecting of you, so highlight them. It should also detail the values and the competencies of that particular company. So what I mean by this is, what are they looking for? So it's what Rebecca touched on earlier. It's things like responsibility, excellence, adaptability, curiosity. Think about what's important for that particular company. Then have a think about what that particular role entails. So what would you be doing every day if you got that job? Once you've had a think about all of those areas and you've highlighted them, it's then really important to use that to tailor your application for that particular company and that particular role. What we do often see candidates can do is use the same answers or the same job adverts, the same job applications or the same CVs for every single job, and that doesn't really help. We do want to make sure that the people applying to Grant Thornton or other organisations have a genuine interest in that employer and that role. So it's really important to make sure your application is tailored. The other things I'd encourage you to do is spell check once, twice, 3 times, get a family member to read through it, and just to make sure that before you press submit on that application, that you're really confident with everything that you've put in there. So that's something that I just want you to have a think about when you're going through an application. Rebecca's now going to talk a bit more about doing a CV.
Thanks, Michelle. So we've got some CV mythbusters here, and I'll go through some tips at the end. But I would say to start with that there are so many templates out there online. So download a few, have a little play, see what format you like. So just to go on to some of the questions that I get asked a lot, and I'm sure everyone in recruitment has been asked these about 50 million times before. So does my CV need to be kept to 2 pages? The short answer is no. It can be longer or shorter. I have seen one that was 13 pages, and truth be told, didn't read beyond the first page. Provided it covers everything you do in a succinct way, 2, 3, 1 pages is absolutely fine. And I guess just remember that your CV is your first step to an interview, and it needs to tell employers what you've done and who you are. So, what do I put on my CV if I have no experience? So, Michelle sort of touched on this one, but it's not uncommon to apply for your first job without having any relevant experience. For these roles, employers are looking for sort of what we call relevant skills or competencies, and there will be examples in your life where you've been able to gain these. So, if we think back to the slide from earlier, teamwork, have you ever played on a sports team or been part of a club? Adaptability, where have you had to adapt your thinking or your style when working in a new group? Maybe you've done coursework with people that you've never worked with before. And just think hard, there will be examples that you can use. So what personal information do I need to include on my CV? So when I started in recruitment, people would put their home address, their date of birth, references. What you really just need to include now is your name, your phone number, email address. Those are the basic details that you need to include. You can include a link to your LinkedIn profile, or maybe if you're applying for a creative role, you might want to put a link to your portfolio in there. But we do get asked if you need to include driver's license, date of birth. I would just leave those out unless you're applying specifically for a role that requires you to have a driver's license. What we do ask is if you could be open about sort of your right to work in the UK. A lot of firms do offer sponsorship, but we just need to know what people's situation is at the beginning of the process. So moving on to social media profiles. So if you do have LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, make sure they're professionally put together. just remember that your social presence is your personal brand and it shouldn't portray you as an exhibitionist party animal. If there are any incriminating photos, delete them or put those privacy settings to high. Should I add a photo? So in some countries, this is the norm. In Europe, it is. In the UK, it's not really. And you can put one on there, but just make sure that you know that it will actually take up space that you may need to use for something else. So, what should I put in my personal profile? Everyone says I am sociable and I work well in a team or as an individual. And this is really vague, wishy washy, and overused. And make your personal profile relevant to you, make it interesting, and really relate it back to the role. And if you want to go into more detail, I'd really suggest putting together a cover letter where you can go into a little bit more detail on what the client's looking for, what you're looking to get from the role, and your relevant skills. So my top tips are putting together your CV, spell check, spell check, spell check, proofread, proofread, proofread. I have lost count of the amount of times people say I'm detail orientated. I can't spell either word. It's really embarrassing. And just make sure that you can account for any gaps. And what I would really say is tailor your CV to the role that you're applying for. And if you can, try and reflect the language that the employer is using in their own job description. So I'm just going to pass you back to Michelle, who's just going to talk you through what happens next.
Thank you. I think they're great tips, and you've busted some brilliant myths there around kind of photos and things like that. So I think that what we want to consider now is what's next really for you. So fast forward, and by this point, hopefully you've now started to think about what role might be right for you. So whether that's kind of a creative role, whether it's a problem solve role, whether it's a people role. Hopefully you now feel confident about where to start. We all know that the internet is daunting and there's so much information out there. So hopefully Rebecca's tips have given you some great ideas as to where you can really start having a look. So I would definitely echo Rebecca's comments. LinkedIn is a brilliant place. So if you haven't already, we really would encourage you to get a LinkedIn profile. And then start even connecting with employers. A lot of people run webinars, and then when we're hopefully out the other side of coronavirus, kind of physical and face-to-face events. So definitely get to know employers. And then hopefully now you feel a bit more confident about writing a CV and submitting an application for when that time comes. So I guess things that we want you to consider now is don't be afraid to follow up. Yes, it's important to be patient, and often employers can be very busy receiving lots of applications. To give you a bit of an idea, we received approximately 10,000 applications for 5 graduate roles. So in the height of kind of busy season between September and November, we're very busy. So please do be patient with us. We do our absolute best to get to you as quick as we can. But sometimes that's not possible. But that's not to say don't follow up. Kind of a polite, professional sort of reminder or chaser doesn't do any harm. And sometimes actually it's great to show your motivation. Then also, secondly, I would really get yourself in that positive mindset. Start thinking, do you know what, I'm going to get through and I'm going to get to that interview stage. And actually, if I get to that interview stage, what types of things might I be asked about? Most companies will detail their assessment stage on their website. So at Grant Thornton, if you go on our website, you'll be able to see the recruitment stage that you would go through, and many employers do that. And some of our kind of competitors, so to speak, some of the larger professional services have brilliant websites to give you some hints and tips as well. So really make use of all of that. I would also start thinking about the competencies that you're going to be asked. So going back to Rebecca's earlier slide, what are the particular competencies and values that employer looks for? So I always use this example with my younger cousins that, even if you're applying for Tesco, I've not gone on the Tesco website, but every little helps is their slogan. I see it lots with the coronavirus adverts. So I would assume that one of their questions might be about customer service or going the extra mile. And therefore, quite easily, I might start to think about what example have I got where I've delivered great service, or where I've gone that extra mile and I've really took pride in what I've done. So that's an easy way to start collating those examples and start thinking. But don't worry, I often think when people talk about results focus, they expect people to be running marathons and be achieving all these great things, which I've never done. So you don't need to be doing all these fantastic things. Actually, those small things and those acts of kindness we're seeing right now through coronavirus times, they're great, and start thinking about how you can bring them to life. And then once you've got those examples, it's about using techniques to be able to portray them in an interview. And that leads us really nicely onto, if you want some support in how to prepare examples for an interview, be that a telephone interview or a video interview, or even a face-to-face interview for that final round, please do join us for our next interview webinar, which is on the 16th of April at 11 o'clock. So Rebecca's going to briefly touch on the next webinars now, just so you've got an idea of what's to come.
Thanks, Michelle. So as you can see, our series is in front of you. So our next webinar is getting to grips with interviews. So that's next week. So it's not just your face-to-face interview, but sort of looking at assessment centres and digital interviews, which is something that clients are using a lot. And then we're looking at personal brand and commercial awareness. So that's something I touched on earlier, but this is going to be a webinar that will go into a lot more detail on how to market yourself to potential employers. And then our last webinar in the series is more about sort of focusing on careers in accountancy. So we've dragged in a few of our current graduates on school leave. They're really happy to help because we love collaborating here. And it's just talking about sort of life in a professional services firm and what you can expect. So if anyone on this webinar is interested in joining Grant Thornton, then potentially that might be a good one to look at. So we're going to move on to our question and answer session now. So we've got our colleague Ursula on the line, and she'll feed through some of the questions to us. So please don't be shy. If there's anything that we can't answer, we're happy to sort of take it offline if we run out of time and answer a few questions over the next few days. So over to you, Ursula.
Yep, brilliant, Rebecca. So this question is for you, Rebecca. So if there are tasks in the job description which you have never done before, how can you prove on your CV that you are suitable for doing those tasks?
So a lot of times clients will split those into essential and non-essential. So what you can do, as I said before, is really just look at what that task is asking you. So if it's around sort of customer service, where have you gone the extra mile, for example? So really trying to just break down what they're actually asking you and making it relevant to the experience you have. Or where have you worked in a project team? Well, I'm sure that through sort of education, you have worked on teams and done projects before, so there will be a way that you can make it relevant.
Brilliant, thank you, Rebecca. And Michelle, I've got one for you. So I'm an engineering student, but I'm looking for a role in the financial services industry. I'm in my penultimate year at university, and it has been a struggle to get a summer placement in this industry. Sometimes I feel it's because I lack the sufficient skills needed to succeed in this specific industry. Please could you offer advice on how I could gain or show relevant skills to be able to get into this industry?
Okay, thanks, Ursula. Firstly, I'm sorry to hear that you've had those troubles. And hopefully if you've applied to Grant Thornton, we've been able to give you some feedback. If you haven't applied to Grant Thornton, obviously I'd encourage you to, and if you have applied to Grant Thornton and you would like some further feedback, then please get in touch with us via the stay in touch details on the page right now, and that your email will be passed directly to me and I'll help you with that. I think if I was to give you some advice here that can hopefully help you and others on the call, it would be, first of all, just to have a think about how you demonstrate your passion. I'm quite disappointed to hear that you've struggled, because actually at Grant Thornton particularly, we really welcome a range of disciplines, from degree disciplines, and actually we look at so much more than your not just, but I guess what your degree subject is. So I'm disappointed that that's happened, but I think if it has, I would just encourage you to think about, first of all, how you can demonstrate your passion. So is there anything on your CV or your application where you can really articulate exactly why you want to now move into financial services? Can you almost put that passion into action? So what I mean by that is kind of often actions speak louder than words. So I know it's not always easy to get work experience, but if you can get work experience, brilliant. Or even just going to events and say, you know, I went to this event, or I got mentored by this person, or spoke to that person, and that really sparked my interest. I think that will help. And then just think about what Rebecca shared, so all those transferable skills. So engineering is I believe it was engineering, wasn't it? It was a fantastic degree, and actually there's so many transferable skills that you've got there that will feed naturally into financial services. So go back to those areas and competencies that the financial services company is looking for, and then have a think about what skills and attributes might tie over nicely. But good luck, and thank you for your question.
Brilliant, thanks Michelle. So we've got quite a few questions coming in now. So Rebecca, if you could answer this one for me, please. So how do you show your personality? How do you get your personality across on your application form or CV?
Okay, so this so on the CV, just to sort of split it into two parts, I would look at that personal profile, and I would also maybe look at drafting a cover letter. So with the personal profile, you can make it really personal to you. I mean, please don't say that you love going out and getting really drunk every weekend, and all you'd like to do is just have a good time with your mates, but there will be lots of really good sort of things about you and attributes that you can bring out in the personal profile. And the ones that really stick with me, and I've read a million CVs, I'm sure, are the ones where sort of people do get their personality across. So people that are sort of maybe really numerate, and they like they like sort of problem solving, things that aren't really vague. So just try and make it quite relevant to your personality, and it's fine to be able to put your personality across. And then on the application form, a lot of the time you will have a space to write about yourself and your experience, and again, just make sure that you can sort of put some aspects of your personality across in that space as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And Michelle, I've got a question for you. So how has the COVID-19 situation affected summer internships and the graduate job market?
That's a really great question. It's actually something that we are playing through right now. So like everyone, we're living in this really strange and uncertain time. And I'm sure many of you, I wake up some mornings with a real knot in my stomach and I can't shake it, because it's quite a surreal time. So we're living through it. We haven't got all the answers right now, and that's not to be a politician's answer. We genuinely don't. I think the internship will need to consider whether we can practically run it. So what I mean by that is, are we going to be in lockdown? Are we going to be in the office? Are we going to be able to get the equipment out? So we're working through that right now. For the graduate roles, we're confident that on the whole, we should be okay for that, given that most of them start in September. So we should be moving through with all of those offers. For unfilled roles, so we have got a proportion of vacancies that we were due to fill pre-coronavirus. Those are temporarily on hold, and that's only because right now there's so much uncertainty, and practically it makes things a little bit more difficult as well. So just while we kind of figure out a few things, we're just pausing, making those kind of sensible and hopefully kind of fair decisions, and getting back to people as soon as we can. For us, it's about making the right decisions by the people, by our candidates, and by the business to make sure we kind of come out the other end, and we all kind of come out well, I guess. I hope that helps.
Brilliant, thank you, Michelle. And then Rebecca, we've got another one. So what stands out to a recruiter on a LinkedIn profile? So is there anything in particular that stands out?
So I think it will depend on a little bit on what they're looking for in terms of what skills they're looking for. So on LinkedIn, there is again, and I keep saying it, there's like a personal profile box at the top, so make that concise. But then also make sure that you have all of your experience on there. You can go into as much detail or as little detail as you like, but I would say when you're putting your companies on LinkedIn, make sure that you do put some stuff about your role on there, because if there isn't anything on there, I would be less likely to want to call that person or contact them, because they might not be relevant to what I'm doing at all. So make sure that you do put information about your role or what you've done. And then also make sure that your qualifications are up to date and that you put sort of where you went to school as well. So I recruit a lot of part qualified accountants. So it's really handy to know how much of their ACA or their ACCA qualification they have passed, and keep it up to date. Those are the sort of the main things that stand out to me. There's nothing worse than seeing, oh, I worked at X firm, and then I haven't updated it for about 3 years. So yeah, keep it up to date and put information on there. And you can also add in skills too. So make sure that you add in those particular skills, because sometimes we search by skills. So like external audit, for example. So yeah, those would be my tips.
Brilliant, thanks Rebecca. And just touching on LinkedIn, we've got a question around how effective do you think LinkedIn is for finding a job in big firms?
Do you want to take that, Michelle?
Yeah, I just to make sure I've understood the question, Ursula, I appreciate that might just be the question, but does it seem to read, or the question refers to finding a job in a big company? Is that how it
Yeah,
seems to?
yeah, a big organisation.
Yeah, I think it's really effective. I think it's effective for both smaller and larger organisations. I think it's probably, arguably, this is just my personal view, possibly a little bit more effective with large organisations, and that tends to be because they have usually larger recruitment teams that often are either in-house or they are outsourced. And what that means is that they sometimes have bigger budgets, but not always. And that means that they can invest quite heavily in LinkedIn. So what I mean by this is they are often posting, if not all, a number of their jobs on LinkedIn. They often have a team that would go onto LinkedIn as well and actually try and find people, I guess. So find yourselves and contact you and message you. So I think it's really effective. The other thing big companies often do is have a LinkedIn page. And kind of a LinkedIn kind of hashtag and things like that. So for example, it might be a good opportunity if you're on LinkedIn, if there's certain organizations and certain brands that you really like and you think, I would enjoy working for them, it's a good opportunity to get to them kind of in years to come, or even weeks to come, to follow them on LinkedIn and see what they're posting about and kind of engage with their content. Hope that helps.
Brilliant, thank you, Michelle. And we've got time for a few more questions. So, Michelle, this one might be for you, Rebecca. What is your advice for kicking off a job search for international students if you require a visa?
I can take this one because I recruit a lot of people that require visas. So, first of all, be honest about sort of your visa status. That's absolutely fine. We sponsor people on tier 2 visas, and we also switch people from your tier 4 student visa to a tier 2. So what I would say is, as I say, be honest about it. And also make sure that you're submitting really good applications and that they're really relevant to the role. And I'd also recommend that if you have anyone in the UK currently that can sort of refer you to their colleagues. So most employers have a company referral scheme. So that's also another good way of making those applications. And I'd say that to anyone actually. So make sure that you can utilize those employer referral schemes. And I just say make the application really relevant and be honest about the visa status as well. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you, Rebecca. And I think we might have time for one or two more. So Michelle, this one's for you. You mentioned that September to November is the busiest time period. Is that when you release all your graduate spots, or is there a second wave of places released afterwards?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and shows that we've got some listening, which is brilliant. So thank you very much for the question. So we at Grant Thornton, so I can't speak for other companies, but I do believe other large professional services and non-professional services firms do the same. We kind of go live with all of our roles, all of our trainee roles, in the first week of September. Now, what we do make clear is that we fill as we go. So what I mean by that is we would kind of go live with all of our roles. Sometimes we do stagger certain dates. So for example, we might start with graduates and school leavers in September. We open interns and 12-month placements a little bit later into the calendar year. And then we would start kind of the assessment process with experience days, our final rounds, happening anytime between October and December. So that does mean that sometimes in some areas, so very I guess London and the northwest, kind of large cities where a lot of people usually want to work, we can fill jobs quite quickly, and then we can be kind of full from January, February. We don't tend to have a second release, so we get all of our recruitment numbers signed off in the summer. We go live anywhere between September and November, December, depending on the programme. We fill as we go, and then we close the role once we've filled it. So if there's people on this call now that are considering applying for graduate spots or apprenticeships, I would consider applying as soon as you can if possible, just because it limits the chance of missing out on opportunities.
Brilliant, thanks Michelle. And Rebecca, one final question just quickly before we close. So is it more advisable to connect with as many people as you can on LinkedIn? Because sometimes I don't know if I should connect with all the people I see in the recommended section.
I think it really depends whether on a few things, whether they are doing or they're working in careers or companies that are relevant to what you're looking for. So if they are, I would definitely connect with them. I think my network is like 20,000 something, and I have a lot of people connect with me because they want to obviously find opportunities. So I'd make sure that they're relevant to the company and career path that you're interested in. And when you do connect with them, just maybe send them a little note like, I really like to connect with you, interested in building a career in XYZ. So it's a little bit more personal, and often you can kind of start a conversation with those people. But what I would also say is just try not to just connect with everybody you see. Just try and keep it a bit more focused. So that those would be my recommendations on that.
Brilliant, thank you Rebecca. So apologies if we haven't answered all of the questions in the questions box. However, I do have an email address, so if you just want to get a pen and paper just to note this down, you can forward any further questions to this inbox and we will come back to you in the follow-up. So the email address is traineerecruitment@uk.gt.com. So that's traineerecruitment@uk.gt.com. So I'll just hand over back to Michelle and Rebecca to close.
Thank you, everybody. So thank you very much for all your questions. I'm watching Rebecca's face and kind of the interest when they're coming in. I think we've personally really enjoyed sharing some hints and tips with you. We understand that it's a very tricky time for a lot of people out there, especially people that have got job offers now or applying for jobs. So we thank you for joining. We hope that you found the content useful and it helps you with any future jobs. There is a very, very short survey, a couple of minutes after we close, if you are kind enough to share any feedback with you. I don't know if there's any final words from yourself, Rebecca.
Just really say thanks very much, guys, for listening, and I hope it's helpful in your job search. And as Michelle said, happy to answer any other questions offline. So thank you.